She needs positive energy only, okay? Please don't come. That's what my sister said. Not thank you.
Not sorry. Just that.
After I spent $16,000 of my savings to cover her daughter's emergency surgery.
Hi.
My name is Jordan Alara. I'm 32. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned. Because I've never been good at being the villain in their version of the story. I'm the fixer. The calm one. The one they call when it all falls apart. But that night, when I opened the group chat and saw photos of the recovery party, the pink balloons, the matching family shirts, the caption that read, "We're surrounded by love to hearts #FamilyFirst," my chest got tight. They'd invited everyone, even family members I hadn't seen in years. Everyone but me. The woman who paid the bill,
Who cried outside the ICU.
who lied to her landlord to stall rent so her niece could get the procedure in time. And now, I was too negative. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't send a passive-aggressive text. I just booked a one-way solo trip. Somewhere warm. No itinerary. No explanation. The next day, I put my phone on airplane mode and walked barefoot down a quiet beach. I breathed. For the first time in weeks, maybe months. And told myself, let them notice the silence. They did. Because 5 days later, the hospital called them about a suspended account. And suddenly, I wasn't just invited back into their lives. They were at my door. It started with a voicemail. "Hi, Jordan, it's me. Just wondering if we can talk about the hospital thing." No apology. No, thank you for paying.
Just the hospital thing.
I didn't respond. Then came the group text. My mom. "Sweetheart, can you give your sister a call? She's overwhelmed." Overwhelmed? Was she exhausted from choosing balloon colors while I negotiated a $16,000 down payment? I stayed quiet. That's when the hospital billing department finally sent the family the second invoice. The first had been in my name. The second, redirected to my sister's account. Apparently, she'd insisted on being listed as the guardian for legal reasons.
Oops.
That new bill? $4,650, due immediately. Because my last transfer had been reversed. I'd called the hospital from the airport. Explained the situation with brutal clarity. I was emotionally manipulated into covering costs. I've withdrawn financial consent. Kindly remove my name from all future correspondence.
They did.
Now it was on her, and she wasn't ready for that. 14 missed calls in 2 hours. 3 different family members trying to guilt-trip me with soft voices and vague shame. "Jordan, it's not the time for drama. She's going through so much." Family doesn't keep score. But I did. I'd kept score for years. Every borrowed dollar. Every canceled weekend. Every time I covered rent while they posted brunch photos. Now, the silence was loud. And for the first time, my absence was more noticeable than my presence ever was. I didn't disappear out of anger. I disappeared to see who would notice the weight I'd been holding. And the weight was crashing down on them, fast. Because what came next wasn't just financial fallout. It was a chain reaction. By day 5, it wasn't just my sister calling. It was her fiancé. Then her best friend. Then a message request from a woman I didn't even know. "Hi, Jordan. I'm Ashley. I handle the venue bookings for children's parties in Pinebrook. There's a little issue with the final payment." I stared at the message. A children's recovery party. With a $2,300 catering tab. And balloons. And a magician. All charged, guess where? The same credit card I'd canceled mid-flight. They'd booked it before asking me. Just assumed I'd handle it. Now vendors were demanding payment. The venue was threatening small claims court, and everyone was realizing the Bank of Jordan was closed. Then came the worst blow. A blog post. From the hospital's charity partner. They'd shared a photo of my niece in recovery, smiling, strong, along with a caption. "Thanks to the incredible generosity of her aunt, this brave girl got a second chance at life." The post went viral in our local community. And suddenly, I was the center of attention. Not for drama, but for quiet kindness. Local news reached out. My old high school teacher sent flowers. My landlord even wrote me a thank you note with $100 off rent. My sister? She was humiliated. Because in every comment section, people were praising me. Not her. Not her parents.
Me.
She called again, this time sobbing. You made me look like a bad mother, I replied, calm and cold. You did that all on your own. And that's when she whispered the words I'd never heard from her in 3 decades of sisterhood. Please help me. But I wasn't done learning how far they'd go. What I found next in my mailbox wasn't a thank you card. It was a summons. I held the envelope under my kitchen light, heart thudding. Jordan Carter, defendant. Case no #8429, CV. Breach of verbal contract. Filed by my sister. She was suing me for emotional damages and financial sabotage, claiming I intentionally canceled payments after agreeing to cover them. Said I caused public embarrassment. Said her daughter's health was at risk because of me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something deeper. Older. This was what it had always been. Manipulation in designer clothing. I called a lawyer. A pro bono women's legal clinic handled the first consultation. They read the claim and laughed out loud. This'll get thrown out faster than a junk mail coupon. Still, I prepared. I gathered texts, voicemails, the invoice trail, bank receipts, that hospital post, time-stamped and viral. At the hearing, my sister arrived in pearls and crocodile tears. She sobbed about betrayal, about broken promises, about sisterhood. The judge, an older black woman with silver hair and a steel gaze, listened quietly. Then she turned to me. Miss Carter, do you have anything to say? I stood. Not angry, just clear. I didn't abandon my niece. I paid for her life-saving care. What I won't pay for, ever again, is being used. The judge nodded once.
Sharp.
Final. Case dismissed. Plaintiff is advised to reassess her definition of family. My sister burst into tears again, but no one followed her out this time. Not even our mom. Outside the courthouse, the sun hit my face. I had a voicemail from a hospital. A nurse I'd never met. Jordan, I don't know what you did, but your niece's recovery is ahead of schedule. She keeps asking when she'll see you again. That was the only courtroom victory I needed. But part 5? That's when my mom finally showed up, not with apologies, but with a request. Mom showed up on my doorstep 4 days after court. Not crying. Not angry. Just tired. A silk scarf draped around her shoulders like a peace flag. I don't want to fight, she said. I just want to talk. I didn't step aside. I waited. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. A copy of the GoFundMe she'd secretly created for my niece's recovery, one that had raised over $12,000 using my name, my story, and my photo, without my consent. I didn't mean for it to go viral, she mumbled. But people cared. It helped. I stared at her. You raised money using me and didn't tell me? She flinched, then tried to justify. It was for your niece. You said you didn't want to help anymore. I said I wouldn't be used anymore. I cut in. There's a difference. She begged me not to report it. Said it would shame the family. Do you want the world to think we're scammers? I took the paper from her hand, folded it slowly, then said, You already did that part. She cried, the kind of crying meant to soften someone. But I didn't soften. I closed the door. Then I called the GoFundMe support line, reported the misuse. Attached screenshots. Proof. The campaign was shut down within hours. Donations frozen. Funds redirected to the hospital account in my niece's name. That same night, my niece messaged me. Auntie J, Mom's crying again. But I told her I'm proud of you. You're the only one who shows up for real. I sat with that. With the quiet. With the ache. With the unexpected bloom of peace. But I wasn't finished yet. Because someone else had also used that campaign. And part 6 is when I found out who. It started with an email. Subject line. Urgent, GoFundMe press inquiry. I blinked. Inside was a note from a journalist who'd seen the now-deleted fundraiser. They were doing a feature on viral donation scams and had questions, including why the campaign had linked to a local real estate business as its withdrawal account.
Wait, what?
I read it twice. Then opened the cached fundraiser page. Scrolled to the fine print. And there it was. The connected withdrawal account didn't say my mom's name.
It said,
Sterling View Realty, LLC. My sister's husband's company. Ezra. Of course. I knew they'd always been close. But this? Using my niece's pain. My contribution as a front for their own gain? My hands shook as I opened my banking app. Cross-referenced the wire I'd sent the hospital. I hadn't noticed it then, but the account number wasn't the one I had on file for billing. They'd rerouted the funds. Through manipulation. Through back-end changes. And through me. They had likely paid part of the bill. Enough to keep me quiet. But the rest?
siphoned.
It wasn't about my niece anymore. It was about laundering compassion into a profit. And suddenly, the party I hadn't been invited to, the unspoken cold shoulders, it all made sense. I wasn't bad energy. I was inconvenient. Because people who pay attention notice where the money flows. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to my sister. Not to Ezra. But to the local district attorney's office, attaching all the evidence. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that builds before a storm. By morning, the silence had cracked. Mom was at my door. No calls. No texts. Just her, standing there with the kind of brittle smile you wear when you know the truth is catching up. She didn't ask to come in. She walked straight to my kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat like she still owned the place. "I heard," she said, voice thin, "about the letter." I didn't answer. She stared at me, then added, "It's not what you think. Ezra made decisions. But we were trying to protect you. You're always so sensitive." I almost laughed. Sensitive? I funded your daughter's surgery. I kept your lights on for 3 years. And you still labeled me bad energy. She stood, the mask slipping. "You're going to ruin us." "No," I said quietly. "You did that when you turned compassion into a con." She opened her mouth, but just then a knock at the door. I didn't have to guess who it was. A woman in a gray blazer stood there, badge visible, notepad ready. Behind her, another officer. "Are you Miss Caldwell?" I nodded. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an open financial misconduct case. We have a report of fraudulent fundraising, misuse of healthcare funds, and unauthorized rerouting of bank transactions." I stepped aside. My mother's face drained of color. "I didn't," she began. But her voice was already too late. "They didn't come to accuse me. They came because I was the witness. The whistleblower." I watched as she sat down on my couch, trembling, answering questions she never thought would be asked. That night, I lit a candle by my window. Not for revenge, but for justice that finally remembered my name. The newspaper never printed my name. Just a quiet blur buried between weather forecasts and sports scores. "Local family under investigation for medical fund misappropriation. Charges pending." But I clipped it anyway. Taped it to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Not for pride, but for clarity. My sister sent a voice note a week later. It started with sobbing. Then begging. Then bargaining. She said the party was never meant to exclude me, that I misunderstood everything. That family is messy, but love is real. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because sometimes healing means choosing silence over reopening wounds for someone else's comfort. The hospital called again. This time, to tell me the debt was cleared. A donor, anonymous, had paid the remaining $4,000. I knew it was Sarah. No message. No credit. Just grace. And so I did what felt right. I took the money I'd saved for next month's rent and booked a tiny cabin by the lake. Just me, a journal, and an old paperback I hadn't touched in years. On the first morning there, I brewed my own coffee, walked outside barefoot, let the light fall across my face like forgiveness. No texts, no guilt, no titles like The Outsider. Just me, the woman who used to beg for a seat at the table, now building her own table beneath a sky too wide to be owned. As the wind kissed the pine trees and silence wrapped around me like a soft coat, I whispered, "You'll never steal my peace again. They say healing is loud."
But mine?
It arrived in the form of stillness. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Nobody came. Balloons curled in the heat. Pizza boxes untouched. A unicorn cake that took me 6 hours to decorate? Still perfect. Untouched. My daughter sat in the backyard wearing a paper crown and a white dress she picked herself. Every 10 minutes, she looked at the gate. Then up at me. Then down at her glittery shoes. 11 candles. No guests. Not even a text. I swallowed the lump in my throat and knelt beside her. "Maybe they got lost," I said softly. She nodded, but I knew better. Because this wasn't the first time. They didn't forget. They chose not to come. A week later, my phone pinged.
Mom.
The same woman who didn't call, didn't show, didn't even like the photo I posted. Text message. "You're invited to Eliza's Sweet 16. Theme, luxury lavender. $2,100 per person. Venmo me." No apology. No explanation. Not even a fake excuse. I stared at the screen, fingers trembling, pulse flatlining into fury. That night, I sent exactly $1. Memo. "Congratulations. That's all you'll ever get from me again." Then I changed the locks. Blocked every number. Erased every group chat. 3 days of silence. Then, 2 days later, I opened the door in pajamas and a robe, to flashing lights. 2 police officers. "Ma'am, are you redacted? We received a complaint from your mother." My stomach flipped. I blinked once, then stepped aside, calm as ever. Because this time I wanted a record. "I'm sorry, what was the complaint?" I asked. The officer checked his clipboard. "She says you're withholding family funds and threatening to blackmail." I blinked. Blackmail? I hadn't said a word. I just sent a single $1. That's when I understood. They weren't mad about the money. They were mad about the silence. I invited them with open arms to my daughter's party. They ghosted us again. And now they wanted me to fund their $100 plate ego parade?
No.
Not this time. "I have receipts," I said, stepping back inside. I handed the officer my phone.
Group chats.
Voicemails. The text asking for Venmo. My blocked call log. The officer scrolled, then glanced at me with a slow, tight-lipped nod. "I'll file this as a civil dispute, ma'am. Not criminal." They left without another word. I closed the door and collapsed against it, not from fear, but release. It hit me like a wave. They really would have let me fund their lives forever. As long as I kept my mouth shut. As long as I smiled. As long as I kept swallowing my daughter's tears and saying, "They love us. They're just busy." Not anymore. I made 2 calls that afternoon. To my lawyer, asking about trust restructuring. To my therapist, asking for help navigating toxic detachment. But the third call, that came at 7:44 p.m. My cousin Mia, whispers in her voice. "They're planning something. I overheard your mom and aunt talking about ruining your reputation before the Sweet 16. My heart paused. I looked out the window and quietly said, "Let them try. This time, I'm documenting everything."
I didn't sleep that night.
Neither did my daughter. She sat cross-legged on the couch, sketching quietly in her notepad, eyes dimmer than usual. I asked what she was drawing. "A party," she mumbled, "where people show up." I nearly broke, but I didn't. Instead, I stood, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We'll make one." The next day, I drove straight to the Garnet Ballroom, the exact venue my family had booked for the niece's $100 head Sweet 16. It was still under pending final payment. I asked the manager what the refund policy was if the pair backed out. She raised an eyebrow. Then I showed her the lease. They had used my business credit as backup collateral.
Classic.
I smiled. "I'd like to assume the reservation," I said. Same date, new event. I paid in full. Venue, mine. Date, mine. Guest list? Every kid who had ever been overlooked, uninvited, or treated like an afterthought. We named it the Golden Ones Gala. I even got a cake vendor to recreate the original Sweet 16 order. Except this time, the frosting would read, "To the ones they left behind." By Thursday, invitations were out.
Custom made.
Hand-delivered. No Venmo required. Just presents. That evening, my sister texted, "Did you really hijack our event?" Then Mom called, "Fix this, or I'll make you regret it." I replied with a screenshot of my contract and a single caption. "You should have read the fine print before writing me off." Outside, my daughter stuck stars on the ceiling and whispered, "Do you think they'll come?" I smiled and said, "They don't need to." Because this time, the celebration wasn't for them. The night of the gala arrived like a secret the sky was keeping. Every inch of the garnet ballroom shimmered in gold and soft blues, a magical blend of elegance and innocence.
Kids trickled in shyly at first.
Some wore hand-me-downs. Some wore borrowed suits. Every single one wore the look of someone who thought no one remembered them. Until now. My daughter, in a glittery blue dress and tiny silver flats, stood at the entrance with a clipboard. "Welcome to the Golden Ones Gala," she whispered with a smile. Then came the moment that stopped everything. 3 people walked through the door, not invited. My mother, my sister, and my niece still dressed for her Sweet 16. They paused at the entrance like they owned it. I calmly stepped forward. "Sorry, this is a closed event." "You can't be serious," Mom hissed. "This was supposed to be our party." I smiled, reached into my clutch, and handed her something. A glitter-covered envelope. Inside, a printed screenshot of her original invite, the Venmo request, and my $1 reply. "Looks like you already got your celebration," I said and turned away. Security didn't need prompting. They didn't yell. They simply redirected. As the doors closed behind them, my daughter stood beside me, watching. "Was that rude?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "That was called boundaries." By 9 p.m., a video of the gala had gone viral. One of the guests, a local teen vlogger, live-streamed everything. Caption: "The most beautiful party I've ever been to, and none of her family came. Except the one that mattered." Comments flooded in. My phone buzzed with messages. But for once, I didn't check them. Because inside this ballroom, my daughter was seen. And that was worth far more than $2,100 a head. By morning, the messages turned to threats. "You embarrassed us publicly. Delete that video." We were family before this circus. I ignored everyone. What they didn't know was this. I didn't post the video. The teen who did? Her father was a local reporter, and his morning article headlined, "Single mom throws party for overlooked kids, turns her daughter's pain into joy." Then came the interviews, the podcast features, even a small grant from a local nonprofit who wanted to sponsor next year's gala. My daughter asked shyly, "Can we do it again?" I said yes, but with one condition. No guest lists with people who treat your pain like it's invisible. She nodded. And that's when it happened. 2 days later, a police car pulled into my driveway. My heart dropped. My daughter's fingers wrapped around mine, her eyes wide. I stepped outside. "Ma'am, we received a report of suspected fraud and child endangerment from a family member," the officer said, reading off a complaint. My chest clenched. Child endangerment? The same woman who mailed me a $2,100 invoice now wanted the state to punish me for joy? I asked one question. Was the report anonymous? The officer hesitated, then said, "Not exactly." He handed me a name. My mother's name. My pulse steadied. I looked him in the eye. "Would you like to see the event footage, officer? Or the article? Or the verified receipts?" "I have everything logged." He nodded slowly. "Actually, yes. That would help a lot." I opened the door. Behind me, my daughter whispered, "Is this because of the party?" I crouched down. "No, sweetie. This is because sometimes love makes people bitter when they can't control it." And today, I wasn't controlled. The officer sat on my couch with a pen, a notepad, and a surprising softness in his voice. He watched the video of the party, balloons, music, tables with hand-labeled names for kids. No one else celebrated. He glanced at my daughter, playing quietly in the next room, coloring a picture of her and me under a big rainbow. "Ma'am," he said, "I apologize. We get these kinds of calls, sometimes vindictive reports meant to intimidate." I nodded, pushing a folder toward him. Inside, every receipt, background check on the volunteers, parental permissions, even allergy disclosures signed by guardians. He flipped through them. Then his eyes paused on one name. "Your mother claimed she paid for the event," he said slowly. I didn't laugh. Instead, I handed him a copy of the Venmo transaction. $1 sent from me, with the note, "Congratulations." He blinked, then smirked. "I see." When he stood to leave, he handed me a copy of the official report form. "This is now on record as a false claim. If they escalate, you're covered." I walked him to the door. Before leaving, he looked at me, really looked, and said, I've seen a lot of messy families, but not many people clean the mess with kindness." I shut the door after he left and leaned against it. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from my niece, the sweet 16 girl. "Auntie,
I didn't know what they did.
can I still come over?" And that cracked something open. Not every seed grows bitter in a rotten garden. I texted her back.
Yes.
"But bring your own glitter." That night, we sat under fairy lights, my daughter teaching her cousin how to make balloon crowns. There was no music, no photographer. Just real, untidy healing. 2 days later, my mom showed up. Not with flowers. Not with regret. But with a printed spreadsheet and a pen. "Listen," she started, walking right into my living room. "I've itemized everything. The party, the decorations, the food. If you just pay $1,050, you'll be invited again next year. It's fair." I didn't blink. Behind her, my daughter sat quietly on the staircase, hugging the same stuffed bunny from the birthday party no one came to. Mom noticed.
"She's too sensitive," she snapped.
"That's the real issue here." I didn't say a word. Instead, I walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a small pink envelope. It still had glitter from my daughter's party. I handed it to her. Inside, a printed photo of the empty backyard, party hats scattered on chairs, and one candle lit on a cake that said, "You are loved." She waited 3 hours, I whispered, in her crown, by the front door. My mother didn't open the photo. She just said, "It's not always about your feelings. Family is messy, but you don't turn your back." I looked at her. "No," I said softly, "but sometimes you close the door before the mess ruins what you've built." She scoffed.
"So this is it?"
"You're going to exile us." I smiled gently. "I'm not exiling anyone. I'm protecting someone." Then I opened the door. She stood still for a moment. Then, without looking at me, she walked out. No screaming. No dramatics. Just the quiet realization that access had expired. That night, I deleted the group chat, changed my daughter's emergency contact to my best friend, and ordered glitter paper to send thank you notes to every vendor who stayed that rainy day, even when no one showed up. Some parties aren't for guests. They're for guardians of joy. Say next for the final part, where poetic justice lands quietly, like a birthday wish whispered over an uncut cake. A week passed before I heard the knock again. But this time, it wasn't police. It was a courier, standing with a clipboard and a small, sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter from my mother's attorney. "Your refusal to contribute financially to the Sweet 16 event has caused emotional and reputational damage. We're requesting a settlement of $2,100 to resolve this matter amicably." I read it 3 times. Then I laughed. Loudly. Honestly. My daughter looked up from her coloring book. "Is it another joke, Mom?" I nodded, kneeling beside her. The kind that only gets funnier with time. That evening, I typed a single-page response on crisp ivory paper. "Dear Counsel, I respectfully decline. Please inform your client that emotional damage cannot be claimed from those who never showed emotional presence." Attached is a Venmo screenshot of the $1 payment sent. with my final congratulations. Also attached, a photo of an 11-year-old girl blowing out candles in a backyard, surrounded by no one but hope. She deserved better. She will get better. This matter is closed. Do not contact me again. I signed it,
Sealed it. Sent it.
and for the first time in years, my heart felt weightless. Later that night, my daughter found an old invitation from her party. It still had glitter. Should we throw another one? She asked. I smiled. Only if you want to.
She grinned.
Only if it's just us. So we did. Just the two of us, a cake, and fairy lights strung in the hallway. She wore her crown again. And when she fell asleep, cheeks sticky with frosting, I whispered, "You are not anyone's backup. You are not invisible. You are the guest of honor in your own life."